Evelyn Moore was the kind of woman you'd expect to see smiling sweetly at the door of a quaint little cottage, welcoming children with freshly baked cookies. She had blonde hair neatly pinned back, soft green eyes that crinkled when she smiled, and always dressed in floral prints that hinted at a long-lost era of elegance and simplicity. At 65, she was a figure of warmth and comfort, known for her patience and tender care. For over 4 decades, Evelyn had been a beloved kindergarten teacher at Maplewood Elementary School, and everyone in the small, tight-knit town adored her. She lived in a charming, well-kept house at the end of Maple Street, where her front yard was always meticulously groomed, with colorful flowers blooming year-round. Her students loved her gentle manner, and parents often felt reassured knowing that their children were in Miss Moore's capable hands. To the community, she was a saint, always volunteering at church events, offering to babysit for busy parents, and even organizing fundraisers for local charities. She seemed like the perfect grandmother figure, full of love and wisdom. But beneath that wholesome exterior, Evelyn harbored a dark secret. Inside her tidy home, hidden behind lace curtains and floral wallpaper, was a woman who had long since grown tired of the monotony of her carefully curated life. Every evening, after the last child had been picked up and the school's hallways had fallen silent, Evelyn returned to an empty house that echoed with loneliness. She had never married, never had children of her own, and the years had begun to weigh on her. She yearned for excitement, for something or someone to make her feel alive again. One fateful night, driven by a mix of boredom and curiosity, Evelyn discovered an online forum that would change everything. It was a chat room for younger men who sought the company of older women. At first, she only lurked, reading the messages and trying to imagine what it would be like to engage with someone so much younger. The thrill of the taboo, the possibility of being desired again, was intoxicating. She never imagined that she would actually reach out to anyone until she met Alex. Alex was a 22-year-old who had a rebellious, bad boy charm. He was tall, with tousled brown hair, piercing black eyes, and a mischievous grin that suggested he had gotten away with a lot in life. He was struggling to make ends meet, living in a tiny rundown apartment and drifting through a series of dead-end jobs. When Evelyn messaged him, he was intrigued by the mystery of this older woman who seemed to have it all together. Their conversation started innocently enough, but it wasn't long before they became more flirtatious, and soon Evelyn and Alex were engaging in a steamy, secret affair. For Evelyn, the relationship was a revelation. Alex made her feel wanted, desired, and young again. She bought him gifts, showered him with affection, and paid his rent, ensuring he was financially dependent on her. She craved his attention, and she loved knowing that she could control him with her money and generosity. Alex, on the other hand, played along because he enjoyed the perks: dinners at fancy restaurants, expensive clothes, and a lifestyle he could never afford on his own. But deep down, he knew that Evelyn was becoming dangerously attached. As if one forbidden affair wasn't enough, Evelyn's hunger for excitement led her to meet Kyle. Unlike Alex, Kyle was a 24-year-old drifter who had a rugged, boyish charm. He was a bit of a mystery, with a sharp wit and a knack for getting himself into trouble. Kyle had grown up on the wrong side of town, bouncing between odd jobs and living on the edge of society. He was drawn to Evelyn not because of her money, but because she was different from anyone he'd ever met. She was nurturing, yet had a wild streak that made her unpredictable. And Kyle was the kind of person who was always looking for his next thrill. Evelyn was intoxicated by the rush of having two lovers who were young, handsome, and completely at her mercy. She felt powerful, like she had been given a new lease on life. With Alex, she felt in control, enjoying the way he would do anything to keep her happy. With Kyle, it was a game, a dangerous, thrilling game that made her feel alive. She would spend her days playing the role of the sweet, caring kindergarten teacher, and her nights living a double life full of passion and deceit. But there was a darker side to Evelyn's newfound happiness. Her desire for control over Alex and Kyle grew stronger, and she began to manipulate them, ensuring they never found out about each other. She used her money to keep them loyal, always dangling the threat of cutting them off if they ever defied her. She would send Alex expensive gifts with little notes that read, "Don't forget who takes care of you." And she would surprise Kyle with spontaneous trips, only to cancel them at the last minute if she felt he wasn't giving her enough attention. Evelyn reveled in the power she held over them, but her need for control soon spiraled into something more sinister. When Alex started seeing someone his own age, Evelyn found out and confronted him in a fit of rage. She threatened to ruin his life, to tell everyone about their affair, and to destroy him financially. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she hissed, her green eyes cold and unrecognizable. "You belong to me, Alex. I gave you everything, and I can take it all away." Alex was stunned, and for the first time, he saw a side of Evelyn that scared him. He wanted to end things, but he was trapped, tangled in a web of lies and manipulation that Evelyn had carefully spun around him. Meanwhile, Kyle, oblivious to the drama with Alex, started noticing strange behaviors in Evelyn. She would show up unannounced, asking odd questions about where he had been and who he had been with. She became more demanding, more possessive, and Kyle began to feel suffocated. He thought he could handle it, that it was just a phase. But Evelyn's grip tightened, and soon he found himself unable to escape her obsessive attention. Evelyn's life had become a balancing act, and she was intoxicated by the thrill of it all. But her dark desires and need for control were pushing her towards a dangerous edge, and she was too far gone to see it. She believed she had everything under control, but the two young men she was stringing along were starting to catch on, and they weren't going to let her get away with it for much longer. The double life that had once been her escape was quickly turning into a ticking time bomb, and Evelyn had no idea that her desperate need to keep it all together would soon lead to a dark, bloody end. Evelyn's life had become a twisted labyrinth of secrets, deception, and obsession. What began as a thrilling escape from her mundane routine had transformed into a dark, suffocating web of lies, and she was the spider at the center, pulling all the strings. Every night, she meticulously planned how to keep Alex and Kyle under her control, ensuring they never found out about each other. Her obsession had consumed her, and she was willing to do anything to maintain the illusion she had created. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and Evelyn's carefully crafted lies began to unravel. One day, while Kyle was rummaging through Evelyn's purse, looking for a lighter, he found a crumpled photograph of Evelyn with another young man, laughing and holding hands. Kyle's heart dropped. He had never seen this man before, but it was clear from the way they were posing that they were more than just friends. Suspicion gnawed at him, and he decided to investigate further. He discreetly took the photo and showed it to a friend who was good with online searches. A few days later, Kyle had a name: Alex. Kyle was furious. How could Evelyn, who had always seemed so sincere and attentive, be sneaking around with someone else? He felt humiliated, used, and angry. At first, he thought about confronting Evelyn and cutting her out of his life. But the more he thought about it, the more he wanted revenge. He began to devise a plan to make her pay for her betrayal. He just needed to get closer to Alex, to see how deep this betrayal really went. Meanwhile, Alex had grown increasingly frustrated with Evelyn's behavior. Her possessiveness was suffocating, and he was tired of playing her games. She would call him late at night, demanding to know where he was, and if he didn't answer quickly enough, she would show up at his apartment, pounding on the door until he let her in. Once, she even threatened to slash his tires if he tried to leave town without telling her. Alex felt trapped, but he didn't know how to break free without risking everything she had been giving him. One afternoon, Alex received a message from an unknown number. It was Kyle. "We need to talk. I know what she's been doing, and we need to figure this out together." Alex was shocked. He didn't know who Kyle was, but the message filled him with a sense of dread. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet. When they finally sat across from each other at a dingy, dimly lit bar, the tension was palpable. Kyle laid out everything he had discovered, showing Alex the photograph and telling him about his own affair with Evelyn. The two young men realized they had been played, manipulated by a woman who had been using them for her own twisted satisfaction. Anger quickly turned into a dark camaraderie, a bond forged by betrayal. They talked for hours, comparing notes, and with each revelation, their resentment towards Evelyn grew. It was clear she had been controlling them, using her money and charm to keep them close. But it was also clear that she was more dangerous than they had ever realized. Alex recounted the night she showed up at his apartment, uninvited, her eyes wide and frantic, whispering that she would kill herself if he ever left her. Kyle revealed how she had tried to isolate him from his friends, accusing him of cheating whenever he wasn't by her side. By the end of the night, they had come to a decision. They needed to confront Evelyn together. They would catch her off guard, make her face the truth, and then walk away, leaving her with nothing. But as they planned their confrontation, they underestimated just how far Evelyn was willing to go to keep her life from falling apart. The night of the confrontation was tense, the air thick with an impending sense of doom. Alex and Kyle met at Evelyn's house, having decided to surprise her there. They had no idea that Evelyn was already aware of their plan. She had been tracking Alex's phone for weeks, paranoid and desperate to keep her affairs under control. She watched from the upstairs window as they arrived, her mind racing. She felt betrayed, cornered, and it terrified her. But more than fear, she felt rage. Rage at being outsmarted, at the thought of losing everything she had worked so hard to manipulate. When Alex and Kyle walked through the front door, Evelyn was waiting for them in the dimly lit living room, her face a mask of calm. She invited them to sit, offering them tea as if they were old friends. But her eyes betrayed her. There was a wild, frenzied gleam that made the two men uneasy. They tried to keep their composure, explaining that they knew everything, that it was over, and that she needed to let them go. At first, Evelyn tried to deny it, laughing it off as a misunderstanding. But as they pressed her, her demeanor changed. Her laughter stopped, and she stood up, looking at them with a cold, calculating stare. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she whispered, her voice low and menacing. "After everything I've done for you? Number, if I can't have you, then no one can." Before Alex and Kyle could react, Evelyn pulled out a knife from behind a cushion on the sofa. She moved swiftly, slashing at Kyle's arm, causing him to stumble backward, clutching the wound. Alex tried to grab her, but she turned on him, the blade gleaming in the dim light. She was no longer the sweet, gentle teacher. She was a woman driven mad by obsession, her every move fueled by a twisted need to control. The room erupted into chaos as the three of them struggled. Alex and Kyle fought to disarm her, but Evelyn was stronger than they had imagined, her rage giving her a frightening, almost inhuman strength. She slashed at Alex's hand, forcing him to let go, and then lunged at Kyle, who managed to push her away just in time. Blood spattered on the walls, the floor, and Evelyn's floral dress, which now looked like a grotesque parody of her once innocent persona. The fight escalated, and in the heat of the moment, Evelyn managed to pin Alex against the wall, the knife pressed against his throat. "I gave you everything," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You belong to me." Kyle, seizing the moment, tackled her from behind, causing them both to fall to the floor. The knife slid out of Evelyn's grasp, and for a brief moment, it looked like the nightmare was over. But then Evelyn reached for a heavy glass vase on the coffee table, smashing it over Kyle's head, knocking him out cold. As Alex knelt over Kyle trying to wake him, he heard the faint click of a gun being cocked. He turned to see Evelyn, her hands shaking as she aimed the pistol at him. "You can't leave me," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I won't let you." With Kyle unconscious on the floor and Alex staring down the barrel of a gun, it seemed like the end. But Alex, in a final desperate move, lunged forward, grabbing the gun and struggling to wrest it from her grip. A shot rang out, echoing through the empty house, and for a moment there was silence. Evelyn collapsed, the gun slipping from her hand, blood pooling around her. She had been shot, but not fatally. The bullet had grazed her shoulder and she lay there gasping, her eyes wide with shock. Alex called the police, his hands trembling as he cradled Kyle's head, praying he would wake up. When the authorities arrived, they found Evelyn still conscious, mumbling incoherently about love and betrayal, her once kind eyes now hollow and distant. The confrontation that was supposed to free Alex and Kyle from Evelyn's grip had turned into a violent nightmare, leaving all three of them scarred, physically and emotionally. The story of Evelyn's double life, her dangerous obsession, and the shocking violence that followed would soon become the talk of the town, sending shockwaves through the community and shattering the image of the sweet, caring teacher everyone thought they knew. The events of that fateful night left the once cozy house on Maple Street looking like a scene from a horror film. Blood stained the floral wallpaper, shattered glass littered the floor, and the once picturesque living room had been turned into a battleground. When the police arrived, they found a scene that none of them would forget anytime soon. A 65-year-old woman lying on the floor, bleeding, with a look of cold detachment in her eyes, and two young men, one unconscious and the other barely able to stand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The media descended upon the quiet neighborhood like vultures. It didn't take long for the story to explode across news channels and social media. Kindergarten teachers double life exposed in violent showdown, screamed the headlines. Reporters painted Evelyn as a twisted, deranged predator who had used her sweet, grandmotherly persona to hide her manipulative and obsessive nature. The town was in shock. Parents were horrified to learn that the woman who had been caring for their children was capable of such darkness. Evelyn was taken into custody, her fragile body restrained as she was loaded into the back of a police car. The once beloved teacher who had nurtured generations of children was now a criminal, her carefully constructed life shattered. At the hospital, she was treated for her gunshot wound, but it became clear that she was more concerned about Alex and Kyle than herself. She kept asking the officers, "Where are they? Are they coming to see me?" Her delusion that they still cared about her, that they were somehow still hers, was heartbreaking and terrifying. As news of her arrest spread, details of her double life began to emerge. People learned how she had seduced and manipulated Alex and Kyle, using her wealth and affection to control them. Friends and colleagues were stunned. "I can't believe it," one of her co-workers said in a televised interview, her voice shaking. "She was always so kind. I never thought she was capable of this." But the more the story unraveled, the more it became clear that Evelyn had been living a dark, twisted fantasy, one that had spiraled into violence and chaos. The trial was a spectacle. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled for the best angles, and every detail of Evelyn's sordid affairs was laid bare for the world to see. The prosecution painted her as a cold, calculating predator who had targeted vulnerable young men, exploiting them for her own pleasure, and then lashing out when she felt her control slipping. They recounted how she had used money, gifts, and threats to keep Alex and Kyle loyal, and when that wasn't enough, she resorted to violence. But it was the testimonies from Alex and Kyle that truly shocked the court. They took the stand, their faces pale and drawn, recounting the nightmare they had endured. Alex spoke about how Evelyn had made him feel special, only to trap him in a toxic, suffocating relationship. "She would tell me I was the only one who could make her happy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if I ever tried to leave, she would threaten to destroy me." Kyle described a similar experience, but with more fear in his eyes. "She would show up at my place at all hours, demanding to know where I'd been. She would accuse me of seeing someone else, and when I tried to pull away, she got violent." The defense tried to argue that Evelyn was mentally unstable, that her actions were the result of a deep-seated psychological disorder. They painted her as a lonely, desperate woman who had become obsessed with the idea of being loved. But the prosecution was relentless, showing text messages, emails, and photographs that documented her manipulation. They played recordings of her threatening Alex and Kyle, the tone of her voice icy and menacing. "If you leave me, I'll make sure you regret it," she said in one of the recordings, her voice dripping with venom. The most damning piece of evidence was a diary found hidden in Evelyn's house. In it, she had written obsessively about her relationships with Alex and Kyle, detailing her fantasies of keeping them under her control. The entries became darker and more disturbing as her obsession deepened. "They need me," one entry read. "They think they can just walk away, but they belong to me. I'll make sure of it." The diary was the final nail in the coffin, showing the world just how far Evelyn's obsession had gone. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Evelyn was found guilty on multiple charges, including attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and unlawful confinement. The judge, a stern man who had seen his fair share of criminals, did not hold back during the sentencing. "Your actions were calculated, cruel, and driven by a selfish desire to control the lives of two young men," he said, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "You exploited their vulnerability, manipulated their emotions, and when they tried to break free, you responded with violence. There is no place in society for such predatory behavior." Evelyn was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, she showed no emotion. She just stared straight ahead, her eyes empty, as if she was still lost in her own world, still clinging to the delusion that Alex and Kyle would come back to her. But they were done. They had moved on, trying to rebuild their lives, though the scars of their ordeal would never fully heal.